We start in San Diego, and joining me today with his views on the subject is noted conservative writer and speaker Dinesh D'Souza, the New York Times best-selling author of What's So Great About Christianity, published in 2007. Dinesh D'Souza, welcome to the show.
It's good to be on the show.
Good to have you. So now, I've got to ask you, how do you see the debate on evolution and creationism 150 years after Darwin? What sort of dent has it made in belief, in religion, and the, sort of the faith-based community?
Well, I think that there are two aspects of Darwin that need to be distinguished. On the one hand, Darwin was a great zoologist, a biologist, a scientist. He came up with the idea of evolution, a powerful and strongly supported theory. On the other hand, Darwin was also a Christian who lost his faith. Now, he says quite clearly that he didn't lose his faith over evolution. It's not that he figured out evolution and then decided, hey, I can't believe in God. On the contrary, Darwin had personal tragedies in his life, including a young daughter of his who died at a young age, I believe 10. And also, Darwin began to think about many of his own friends and relatives, including his famous grandfather, and he said, look, many of these people are not believers. I really cannot accept a God who would dispatch them to hell. So Darwin, on the one hand, was a great scientist who came up with a validated and supported theory. On the other hand, he also became an agnostic, an unbeliever. Now, today there are a lot of people who try to combine the two Darwins. They try to use evolution, the scientific idea, to promote atheism. And this, I think, is the real reason why we have a controversy. It's not fundamentally over creationism or the six-day account of the Bible. It is that there's a whole group of people, some of them in the media, but many of them in academia, who are trying to prosecute or teach evolution in an atheistic way.
Well, let me ask you, where do you stand on the debate on intelligent design? I mean, does it serve as a bridge of some sort in answering the questions that people, you know, with religious background perhaps have on the concept of evolution?
My own view is that the so-called intelligent design school is erroneous in trying to find fault with aspects of evolution. You'll find the so-called ID guys arguing that the human eye could not possibly have evolved, or they will say that microevolution or evolution within a species is okay, but macroevolution or evolution between species would be impossible. I reject those things. I accept evolution as a scientific idea. What I don't like is the fact that there are a number of people who take evolution and say, look, because we can account for how species A became species B, in other words, for the transitions among species, we have somehow come up with a master theory not only about life, but about the universe as a whole. So, for example, they use this idea of evolution to say, therefore God does not exist. But of course, this is nonsense. For one, evolution says nothing about the origin of life. Darwin didn't even purport to explain that. You have to begin with an extremely complicated original cell that has not only incredible digital powers, but the powers of replication to make copies of itself. Evolution gives very little of an explanation for consciousness or rationality, although there have been several efforts to account for morality. I think reasonable people would agree that the evolutionary biologists have gone only a very short distance to accounting for this thing we call human morality. So my point is, evolution is true as far as it goes, but it doesn't go all that far. And it certainly doesn't account for the design in the universe. So I think the atheistic spin on evolution has been the reason why people react against it so strongly.
Well, let me put you an email that we got from Toronto in Canada here. Gail Gibson wrote in saying, I can't think that the whole 4 billion year process existed just to produce humans. If we humans could be a little less arrogant and stop thinking of ourselves as the lords of creation, the planet and life on it might be able to continue evolving for another 4 billion years. Now, when I just bring up the subject of life on other planets, in terms of the way you see it in the evolution creation debate, do you see the prospect of life on other planets?
I don't have any problem with that, and I have no problem with the idea. I do think that there is a tendency to human arrogance in looking at our place in the universe. I should point out that none of this, by the way, is religious. I think that the religious objection is simply this. You know, if you look at the early books of the Bible, it says that God created the universe and God created man. It doesn't, by the way, say God created man out of nothing. But it says that God breathed a soul into man. And we do have, as human beings, this moral faculty that seems to be to some degree unique. In other words, you cannot say to a stone, you should not roll down the hill. The stone is obeying, you might say, deterministic or uncontrolled laws. And similarly, you cannot say to a cheetah, don't chase after the rabbit. The cheetah is impelled by instinct. But we humans operate in two domains. On the one hand, the domain of what we are and cannot help being. On the other hand, the domain of you shall not. Don't do this. This is wrong. So this whole moral language, this whole moral vocabulary, as I say, there are people trying to give it an evolutionary account, but so far they've only explained maybe 1% of human morality.
We had another email that came in, if I could put this to you. Gene Campbell in Edmonton in Canada says, I think that all scientific evidence discovered since Darwin announced his theory of evolution points to evolution being responsible for all life on Earth. So I do not believe that God is responsible for the creation of man and all life on Earth. I think that scientific thought and reason should be the mainstay of all education. Creationism and evolution cannot coexist. The responsibility of schools is to enable humans to use their brains. Creationism does not do that. Now, when it comes to what's being taught in schools and the whole debate, and it's obviously, again, a very controversial one, how do you think education should tackle this issue of when it comes to teaching religion, when it comes to teaching creationism, and then also putting forward the ideas of evolution?
To some degree, I agree with the email that says that science has a particular job to do, and that is, you might say, to give natural or naturalistic explanations of phenomena. But it doesn't follow at all that naturalistic explanations are the only kind of explanations that there are. So the problem is, I agree, we shouldn't be teaching religious theories in the science classroom. On the other hand, I want to emphasize that I've looked at a number of textbooks written by people like William Provine, Douglas Futima, and others, and they make metaphysical claims in biology textbooks and in books written that purport to give scientific theories. So, for example, you'll see a textbook that has a picture of a bunch of fossils, and at the end of it they'll say, and this makes the idea of God irrelevant. Now, the reason we know that these ideas are finding a foothold is that they're reflected in the emailer's own statement, that, hey, there's some incompatibility between the idea, for example, of evolution and the idea of God. So I think what we see here is, it's not that we want to put in religious theories into the science classroom, but I think we want to take the atheistic theories out of them.
Well, let's get a caller on the line. Al-Amin is on the line from Ireland. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, it's just a simple question. Belief itself is not based on any science.
Okay.
It's just as simple as a belief. If you believe in God, you don't need science. Evolution is science. It's proved in a lab. You sit in a lab and you go ahead with your genetics. So my question is, the whole essence of belief is based on theory that you will never be able to prove, and that is how God is testing. I'm a Muslim myself, but I find no contradiction whatsoever between evolution and science and religion. Religion is something personal that I take as personal, and I just simply believe in it. Once you try to make it complex by trying to justify it scientifically, then you're back to evolution.
That's an interesting point, Dinesh D'Souza. What do you think from what Al-Amin says there?
Well, I think to some degree he's right, and I certainly wouldn't, I don't think there is any incompatibility. To that degree, I agree with him. But I also think that it's not unscientific, for example, to take the universe and ask this question. We know that the universe had a beginning. We know that space and time had a beginning. We know that all of matter had a beginning. In some ways, we know that the laws of physics had a beginning. So what is the cause for which the universe is an effect? In other words, within science, we look at effects and we try to ask what is the cause. It's not an unscientific question to apply that question to the universe as a whole. And so there are lots of people, intelligent people, who believe that a supernatural explanation for the existence of all of nature — you can't give a natural explanation for nature because the universe includes all of nature — is not an unreasonable proposition. So this is a way of inferring the existence of a creator from the fact that we have a creation. Otherwise, you'd have to make the ridiculous assertion either that the universe has always existed, which is scientifically wrong, or you could say simply that there's no cause. The universe caused itself, which I think is equally preposterous.
Well, Dinesh D'Souza, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.